Good morning. This is Sunday, the second Sunday after Easter. It'll help if you've read the Gospel reading from John about Jesus and Thomas's encounter. I wonder how we feel about those times when everything we've learned, everything we know, is suddenly inadequate for the situation in which we find ourselves. Suddenly you turn a corner or you wake up one day and you find that everything's changed. All the stars you normally steer by are not there. Things might have been changing for a while, but you just didn't see it. But suddenly, there you are. Different situation. How do you deal with it? My best guess is that how we deal with seismic shifts depends on our temperament, about how we were raised, and how secure we feel about our place in the world. We each of us have different temperaments, and in a place like a gathered congregation, we learn how each temperament that is present there brings something to the party. The longer we know people, the longer people who journey together in faith in church appreciate the gifts of others, we start to see what's good about what they bring, and we start to overlook their shortcomings. It's a fact that some people manage uncertainty better than others. And the thing about journeying together is that we each carry each other at various stages of the path, depending on how we're gifted. Not one of us alone has gifts and insight for every eventuality as we travel. We need each other. Spiritual growth is not a private thing. It's something where we help each other along the way. Now, the fact about journeys of faith is that by their very nature, from time to time, they will go into uncharted territory. We know this from human relationships. We know that there is always that part of someone else which is just beyond our reach. Something new always to be discovered, however long we know someone. Relationships begin with a lot of expectation and also being able to see what's in that relationship for us. We are full of what that person brings to enhance our life. I love you for what you will become for me. Then, as we move more deeply, as we discover that there is a lot more of them which is not about the part which is facing us, then within that relationship we discover parts of ourselves about which we are not particularly proud, as they break out in times of discord and disagreement. But if we're lucky, we can also realize that not all love is conditional. Not everything is about transaction. That we can come to discover that we are loved by the other no matter what. So much of our relationship with God can fall into the transactional, even as basic as, if I go to church, I'll get to heaven. If I do this, will you do that? If I do this on condition that you do that, that's not really love at all. There isn't any generosity or any openness to the other, no unconditional faithfulness. So our relationship with God can suddenly take us to unexpected places, like our relationship with people can. Something happens, rather like with a human, where we turned around and say, I'm not sure that I know you anymore. We're in a new place, and we don't know how to get out of it. Simon Peter, gripped with fear, yells, I tell you, woman, I do not know the man. The doubt that we most fear can overwhelm us, and instead of walking forward into God's uncertainty, we step back and cling to what we've always known, however inadequate that is starting to appear. Now, as I said at the beginning, we deal with coming to the end of what we know in different ways, depending on what our temperament is, which is why a spiritual journey is best undergone in the company of people with different temperaments. Some of us will rush back and cling to what we already know in the face of all new evidence, while others will step into the unknown and try and understand it. And that's, I think, what we're dealing with in our reading today. Thomas the disciple has been called Doubting Thomas, rather pejoratively. But doubt is an essential quality which drives our faith forward. It propels us into God's unknown. When the space in which we practice our faith starts to become small and we start to doubt it, we can step forward by letting go of that space. But it does mean that for a while we are going to be in free fall with no handholds at all. And that's a necessary part of growing in the faith. If we are of an anxious temperament, then we try to avoid being in free fall. It's not an easy state for any of us, but if we're surrounded by seasoned Christians who know this is a regular part of growing in God, then we know it won't last forever. New stages in any relationship are often preceded by barrenness or dreary routine or boredom or simply, I don't know you anymore. And doubt is actually a way of moving from one level of knowing into a new one. I would almost say that doubt is an essential waymark on the path of walking in the footsteps of Jesus. Essential and recurring. It comes every now and again. And Thomas is one who steps into the unknown with both feet. He features in 4 places in John's Gospel. The first is when things are starting to get dangerous. There's been an attempt on Jesus' life. He raises Lazarus and then alarms the disciples by announcing that he's going right into the heart of Jerusalem, where the outcome is unknown, although, best guess, one outcome is more likely than the others. Thomas goes and steps into that unknown. He says at the end of the Lazarus story, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." Thomas only believes what he can see, but he will die for the love which he has. But he won't pretend the faith he doesn't have. He's saying, I don't get you, but I'm prepared to die for you. He's preparing to step out, showing the reader how compelling being with Jesus can be. A little later in John, Jesus is telling the disciples that he will go and prepare a place. In my Father's house, there are many dwelling places, Jesus says, enigmatically. And it's Thomas who's prepared to address this unknown squarely. Lord, we do not know where you are going, so how can we know the way? Jesus says to him, I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you know me, you will know my Father also. From now on you do know him and have seen him. We wouldn't have got that without Thomas asking the question. He steps out to ask, and we all benefit from the answer. Thomas is prepared to say that he doesn't know. Thomas is about to say, is prepared to say, I don't get this. And the key part of discovering the other, an essential part of walking with God, is being prepared to say that we're on the edge of the world we understand. And our gospel reading today is the 3rd place in John where Thomas has a role which changes our understanding. Thomas will not buy the disciples' story that they've seen Jesus back alive. and unless he sees and touches the evidence himself, he isn't going to go with it. Thomas is admitting that this is beyond the edge of what he's prepared to trust. He is admitting he does not know, which is the beginning of knowing more further. Jesus appears, invites Thomas to verify what stands before him, and he confesses Jesus to be my Lord and my God, the only disciple to do that. And this questioning once again yields treasures which have given readers reassurance for 20 centuries. The reassurance that resurrection does not give us bright, shiny bodies without blemish, which I take as a reproof to Christians who want spiritual life to be blemish-free, squeaky clean. When Jesus is resurrected, he is resurrected with his wounds. His wounds are part of what makes him who he is. Every part of Jesus is brought to new life. As I said last week, resurrection reaches into our wounds and makes them sources of new life as well, once we're able to yield them. Our last mention of Thomas is back at the lake in Galilee. Maybe because he uses his doubt to ask the hard questions, he ends up with a deeper faith, which enables him to remain with his fellow disciples, gives him that constancy that they're on the right track. But the insight he gives us is a valuable one. Doubt is not the enemy of faith, it's doubt that makes faith grow. It's questioning that leads us into deeper communion with the one with whom we are in relationship, as much with God as with each other. The enemy of faith is not doubt, it's fear. And losing fear is possible, but it does not come easily. I'll close with a favourite quote of mine from John Shea's book, Stories of God, which I think expresses what is a recurring feature of our walk with God. When we reach our limits, when our ordered worlds collapse, when we cannot enact our moral ideals, when we are disenchanted, we often enter into the awareness of mystery. We are inescapably related to mystery, which is immanent and transcendent, which issues invitations we must respond to, which is ambiguous about its intentions, and which is real and important beyond all else. Our dwelling within mystery is both menacing and promising, a relationship of exceeding darkness and undeserved light. In this situation, with this awareness, we do a distinctively human thing. We gather together and we tell stories of God to calm our terror and to hold our hope on high.